Welcome to Underground Strategy Podcast. My name is Max and I'm here with Tony as usual. And we have made our way, as you know, into 2025. And it's going to be a blessing or a curse. We don't know yet, but we will find out eventually. So how are things with you, Tony?
It's gotten cold, Max. I can say I've got my winter coat out. I've got my gloves. It's cold. I know you may be more acclimatized to the cold, or you can adjust faster than me. But it hits me like I walked into a brick wall when I enter that frost.
That can happen. I would never admit to that though. But yeah, it's good to hear that you're keeping warm and keeping out of trouble.
No, for me, I just meant for me to acclimate. It takes a bit of time, but I know the drill now. I know just to have all the kit ready, the thermals ready. It's just about preparation. So when it comes, I can just easily adjust.
Yeah, but it's your Spanish and South African blood that needs the adjustment, I think, because it's like when I go to anything warmer than 25 degrees Celsius, I'm like, yeah, it's like being in a sauna kind of thing. So it's the reverse.
This is uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's true. I think you're right. With the heat, one also adjusts, as you know, but I do remember over 40 degrees kind of on the border of Zimbabwe, and that was really kind of, 42, 43, 44, and it becomes, you can't do much and you have to start work really early to get things done. But yeah, I suppose whatever the climate is, we adjust. But today we're not talking about the climate, we're talking about fighting. We're talking about hand-to-hand combat, which happens in any climate. Something that many militaries are close to. That's something that comes from antiquity, but also something that's kind of very present, especially from Hollywood movies, right, Max?
I think hand-to-hand combat, it has different importance in different armies, of course, because it comes down to tradition. We have not been good at hand-to-hand combat. When I did basic training, 10 hours of hand-to-hand combat, and most of that was with a bayonet. But then now we have evolved. Now we're using Krav Maga, the Israeli system, which is good. I will get back to that later, but I think hand-to-hand combat is slightly overrated myself when it comes to actual fighting. But that's a different story. But yeah, I think it has a significant role. And like you said, especially due to Hollywood movies, because they have made it popular. And people think that is like, it's a lot of trench warfare, just fighting your way with your fists and a knife. And I mean, it can be like that. It can be like that in Ukraine, for example, or we've seen it in Ukraine. But I would say on the regular, it's quite uncommon.
I think in South Africa, it was very much the same. When I did basics, it didn't feature. It was something that, we used weaponry. And then later on, of course, they introduced complex systems where they studied and, got with this Krav Maga or different hand-to-hand combat systems, and then systematically introduced that. And I remember I did some martial arts or different types as a sport more. And then I remember when it was being introduced. But I agree with much of what you've said. The idea of it being, a Tom Cruise kind of, one guy takes on 17 people and punches and kicks his way out of it, and then you add a bit of the Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff, and it all becomes maybe much more glamorous than what it really is in the real world. But then, as you mentioned, also even up until even in the Falklands War, and maybe as you said, Ukraine. I mean, we'll need some more stories to come through. But they did trench clearing and they used bayonets, so it was kind of that kind of brutal shock of combat. And I just sometimes wonder, like, how much you can really train for that, because you get the, put your guard up, use the thing, you thrust in this way. But I think some of it is just, you have to get in there and really just, you have to learn by doing, no? As brutal as what that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brute force kind of movement. And I mean, I have trained a fair amount of hand-to-hand combat. And even if it was not my thing, I absolutely sucked at it. Because I think you need to use it effectively. It's years and years and years of focused training like that. But in every kind of fist fight or a hand-to-hand combat situation I have ever been in real life, I have never used anything. You have if you need to, you throw a haymaker, you pick up a chair or a stick or butt of your rifle. It's nothing is it's not looking nice. It's not a very choreographed
Sure. Yeah,
situation.
100%. And I think that's very much when one reads and does interviews and most of the first person accounts is just as you say. No one even speaks about it because it's a few violent moments that you quickly want to forget about and move on with the day. Going back in time, just the historical accounts, the Greeks did the same, right? They had we all know about the Greco-Roman wrestling, but they also had like the boxing and the pancration that was like modern day MMA. And you just think like, I mean, those guys were absolutely chiseled, right? They were ripped, doing a bit of, I'm just going to joke over here, Max, but doing a bit of philosophy in the morning and then out to the open door gym for the afternoon, 1,000 push-ups and so on. No wonder they always were bare chested and all up their sculptures and stuff. And then, a bit of pancration amongst the boys to kind of really get into it. But then even for
Definitely.
but then even for them, when they got into those phalanx type battles, it was depending on how we classify hand-to-hand combat, but it was really just this, the spears and the swords and whatever afterwards, right?
Yeah, I mean, you pick up and you use what you have, and in most of the time, and especially these days, you have an appropriate sidearm, you have a pistol, you have a rifle. You will use that as far as you need to. And I mean, even in Afghanistan, we have been in pretty close situations where you are almost overrun. So you're at a range where you can't use your carbine, but then you use your pistol. I have never seen anyone throw a punch, for example, in the Middle Eastern campaign, because then you have done something wrong if you're on that level. And of course, I mean, there can be some pushing and shoving and a bit of with disgruntled locals and stuff like that, but that's something
Yeah, I
different.
think that kind of pushing and shoving, and really maybe that's where the police or people working that kind of security can maybe utilize, a bit of the joint locks and things like that from hand-to-hand combat, just in a moment where you don't want to do damage, but you maybe lock the arm or, you find a way to get someone into not a full submission kind of MMA thing where you choke them out, but, just where you have enough to neutralize the person or to stabilize the situation and not create a big drama, right? Like you smash someone's nose in, there's blood everywhere. It maybe doesn't do much to calm it down, versus like an arm lock or a wrist lock or something. I mean, for the police, now I'm certainly not an expert.
I mean, it's all about control for them, and it's for sure useful in the military environment as well. But I would say that the brute force element is greater, and you kind of drive the whole momentum is either till it's finished and then somebody's hurt or dead, or somebody have given up. So you come to that stage before you have these intense fistfights. And I think also something we see a lot in the movies when it comes to hand combat is the use of a knife, which is also very, very unusual because it's, of course, I'm going to have a billion messages now saying it's not. Tons of people have done it. Yes, but it's also, the knife is a very hard tool to use. And you need also, again, lots of training. And of course, sometimes, there's probably thousands, 100,000 people that have pulled up a bayonet and stabbed someone and was successful in that. But to use it as a conscious fighting tool, also very unusual, very, very unusual. I think I've never seen I had a knife pulled at me many times, but I never engaged in a knife fight like that.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely a context piece to it. So for soldiers, it might be not very common, as you say. And then for like gangsters in certain areas and for, like in the UK, knife crime is quite common.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cheap and available tool.
It's a cheap and available tool. And then also in other areas, in prisons or whatever, it might, I'm just trying to give some context because it would be just to support your point, that it would be very context specific, where someone would choose that as your weapon of choice, and it would mean it. I think it's all about the availability of other types of weaponry, which would be quite common in a military setting. I know there's going to be we're going to get quite a few messages from the
Yeah.
Philippines and other areas where they do lots of those, the stick fighting and knife fighting stuff. So we're gonna hear about it now, Max.
Yeah, but we are lazy in the Western world, and we are using, we want that long range kind of thing. You sit in your car, you have an automated gun on the roof, and that's it. You just sit and relax and enjoy your way through the contact. But yeah, I'm sure that there's plenty, but I think as you said, it's tradition, and it has to do with time, right? Because even if we have it at an introductory level in the armed forces today for everyone, but it's not enough time. You can learn a few useful moves, but you will not be able to repeat them enough times for it to set, and that's the problem. When I did my first initial thing with Krav Maga, that was like 12 hours a day for 1 month, every single day, and you are so sore after that. I can't even describe that. But anyways, what after that, you were kind of half decent, but still, in the first physical kind of fight I had, even after that, I just used my helmet to knock someone out, punched him in the head with the helmet. So it didn't settle, for me at least, it didn't settle well. So I can't really say that I've used it.
Yeah, but life's practical, right? Like it's not a movie, and so one gets it that you're going to use a weapon, an improvised weapon, an object, to assist you, because it's what's the point? I'm going to throw the perfect rehearsed uppercut, and I miss, and then that's the end of me. So I get you, man. It's getting the job done.
And I think also that we have, the range, the combat range is expanding. It's a lot of strikes. There's a lot of drones. There's a lot of missiles. There's a lot of, and of course, you always try to have as much distance as you can when it comes to combat. So yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what the future is. Do you think it will be more or less hand-to-hand combat?
No, I think it has to remain. I think it has to remain. I know that. So, I mean, probably less, to answer your question, just in practice. But I think it has to remain, because I think in some ways it's almost like it's needed in some situations. It kind of makes us feel like more complete warriors. If I can use a pretentious term like that, to say us as a human species. So I think we need a bit of that, and that it's linked to the close quarter combat stuff. And martial arts will always be big in most militaries, right? Like the judo team, the boxing team, the karate team. So I think it's going to remain as part of the culture. And I don't know. I think we're going to have to give, now that we've talked a lot of crap, we're going to have to give our listeners something, Max. We're going to have to put a little video out there of us hitting the focus mitts or punching bag or something, to put it out after this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I will agree. I will say maybe, but I will do my best at some point. I'm just gonna spend a few months with Mike Tyson and practice my punches first. But I agree with all your points, and I think it has value. I think the most value it has for most people, and at least for when I look from my own perspective, is that it hardens you a bit, because you are not afraid. You have to understand how it feels to be punched. You have to understand, to be punched in the head and to be kicked. And because then you get used to that. Because if it hits you the first time, like if you're in a street fight and somebody punches you, a lot of people, they're just going to be disoriented. They're going to be shocked by the pain and the feeling and the emotion and the spinning of the head. But if you've done that quite a few times, you get more confident like that. So I think it's a confidence builder when it comes to a bit of pain tolerance and this uncomfortable feeling, and still go on. And you know how it feels. It's not that bad, and you can crack on. And that's important, because you're gonna have the same kind of feelings, like if you have a mortar shell exploding quite close to you, or if you you're half falling out of a truck or something. So I think it's good for discipline and good for hardening.
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned, you learn drills, right? The drills kick in. So when I was doing a bit of the boxing and kickboxing, but amateur, in terms of the army stuff, it's drills that people, if you're going to get if you get a flurry of punches, you just make sure your guard's up, your guard's tight, and you then try and do whatever you have to do afterwards, whether that's clinch or find a way out to hold a bit of distance or throw the jab. But you get you get the drills, and you have to go through it, as you've mentioned, in practice, in action, to then develop that fortitude or that character. So it is character building. I think it's still going to be there. I think I think there's a certain romance around it in the espionage movies, in the James Bonds, where it goes beyond the realms of what I think is normal for us humans, and of course the old school Jet Li movies and whatever, which takes this whole thing into a bit of a, and of course they don't. It's meant to just be entertainment. So the one person with the flying kicks and takes everyone out, but in practice, I think a bit of it is good for soldiers, and I think a bit of it is good for us in terms of just being human, whether it's self-defense or whether it's, as you've mentioned, that kind of character building. I'm thinking, going to, as we go forward, because there are these continuities of war. You've mentioned the trenches in Ukraine. First World War, we know there was heavy fighting. Some people said their best weapon there was a trench spade, because someone was coming to clear the trench and they just had to get something and whack, the person jumping into their trench or doing that. So I think that continuities of war are still going to be there, Mass. I think there's still going to be a need for us to, and let's be honest, you probably don't have to train that much to whack someone with a spade really hard in the head. Maybe just have your physical endurance and so on. But I think having the training, even if it's just a few hours of hand-to-hand combat, I think it will give everyone that confidence, to trust themselves a bit more, rather than feeling they'd been this difficult thing unprepared.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think it has its place. I think it's overrated in actual combat a bit. I think it has its place as a training method and a discipline builder and a character builder. And I think it has its actual uses. I was thinking about it right now that, for example, when I've done a fair amount of close protection, and then it's used quite a lot. It's different drills, but it's a bit of crowd control. It's a bit of taking care of your client and moving him around, which is very good, which is actually things that you will use in day-to-day life.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, it's I think we'll add a few links in the show notes for folks, whether it's the Krav Maga stuff, whether it's the different types of hand-to-hand combat systems, or every country has a similar but a bit different approach and different name. We can add one or two in the show notes just for interest, and then look out for a really underwhelming video of Tony hitting a focus mitt and a punching bag in a little while.
I am looking forward to that.
I mean, I'm looking for an excuse to sport our new 788 Underground Strategy T-shirt. So there's the spoiler.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I would love to see them both the T-shirt and the actual
You see what I've gotten myself into, yeah.
Yeah, it's all you. I had nothing to do with it, actually.
I mean, it's a hand-to-hand combat episode, so but I think it's there might be folks out there with different opinions. We're looking forward to hearing from our listeners what their experiences was with hand-to-hand combat in the military or outside. Let us know if that's your thing. If you are watching any of the recent professional fights, MMA, boxing, even if you're into karate or judo, let us know. Drop us a line, and if you want to give us any ideas for the show or to build on this one for the future, please shout. This was just a taster, a bit of a teaser, and then last words to you, Max.
Thank you for that, Tony. And I'm gonna leave you all with a personal opinion and a cliffhanger. Thinking back on the fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson in November, I think it was, and I am of the opinion that match was, or that fight was rigged. So there you have it, folks. Welcome back next week and have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.